Call this meeting, this June 8th meeting of the Public Safety Committee to order. There are two items on tonight's agenda. Item G1 is discussing a Reynolds Park Road speed study, and item G2 is a review of the proposed fiscal year 2015-2016 public safety budgets. Items on the consent agenda will be unanimously approved unless the council member or committee member wishes to have one pulled. Members of the committee, are there any consent agenda items that you'd like to have pulled for consideration? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Move for approval. Second.
It's been motioned properly second. All in favor, please show by saying aye.
Aye.
That is unanimous. Item G1, please.
Reynolds Park Road speed study.
Members of the committee, if necessary, we can have Mr. Turner to speak about this item. I've had a few constituents to approach us requesting a speed study to look at the feasibility for lowering the speed limit on Reynolds Park Road, given all of the amenities that are in the area. The speed study has been conducted, and it's come back, and the study shows that they're not recommending a reduction to 35 miles per hour. However, with this committee's consideration, we could possibly reduce the speed to 40 miles per hour. What I'm asking the committee, if it's okay, is to hold this item in committee so that we can have an opportunity to go out and meet with all of the Reynolds Park residents to issue some kind of survey, hold some type of community meeting to ensure that the residents of this area, in fact, want this speed reduction. So I would entertain some comments or some thoughts about holding this item in committee. Councilmember Byrd.
Chairman, I move that we hold it in committee. I don't know if they considered the cost on one side and the other stuff on the other side. Sometimes during the summer, children are running back and forth across the street, so that should be one of the very best things.
I completely agree, and that's why we had it brought for discussion and for consideration. Councilmember McIntosh.
I have no problem holding it in committee. I think it's a good idea. I do wonder, though, whether we're really going to change behavior on that stretch by just changing the posted speed limits. I think staff will back me up and say that that typically has very little effect. So do we look at traffic calming measures? I have a similar issue in my ward on Grandview. It's the same type of thing. It's a long, straight road, relatively straight road, so people feel very comfortable, very safe, exceeding the speed limits. And I just don't think that posting the signs, I mean, it's a step. It doesn't cost us much, but I think really to change the actual speed, we'll probably have to put some measures in.
Councilmember Light.
Thank you. Mr. Turner, could you explain the math that went into this chart on page 1?
Certainly, Madam. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the city selects recommended speed limits based upon what's called the 85th percentile speed, which is the average plus one standard deviation. And numerous traffic studies over the decades, as well as recommended engineering practice, all have determined that that speed gives you the best recommendations for the appropriate speed for roads. And that means that that's the speed that you can expect drivers to respect and to behave on. When you have a speed limit that is set artificially low, then as Mr. McIntosh indicated, you'll have problems with increased violations. What you generally try to do is affect driver behavior by the character of the road, and one of the things they don't really pay a whole lot of attention to, if they're a familiar driver, is what the signs on that road say. Now, obviously drivers behave differently in the presence of police officers, but as we all know, police cannot be on every road 24 hours a day, and so the behavior of drivers will be different in the absence of officers in that situation.
Thank you. I agree that perhaps looking at some sort of calming scenario might be more worthwhile than just lowering the speed limit. So I wonder if we could ask Mr. Ring or somebody to talk with folks.
So, Mr. City Manager, Mr. Turner, what I'm hearing, in addition to the community meeting that we're going to have to discuss this with the residents, if we could prepare some thoughts about traffic calming, partnering with our Winston-Salem DOT, and also we'll try to work with the Chief of Police to look at some sort of traffic enforcement. We know that is not completely the answer, but I think if you couple traffic calming with traffic enforcement and just some general safety ideas, and I know on Salem Lake Road, they've put some speed limit signs, but they use these lime green backgrounds to kind of draw attention to the speed limit. That may or may not help, but we want to say that we've done everything that we can as a council and as a committee to take a look at the problem that the members of the community are having. So what I'm hearing is we'll hold this item in committee, and we'll bring it forward as soon as possible after we've looked at all the details, Mr. Turner.
Certainly.
Thank you. Item G2, please.
Review of proposed fiscal year 2015-2016 public safety budgets.
This is our time as a public safety committee to review our 2015-2016 public safety budget, as Councilmember Burke and the members of this committee have done for so many years. Moments ago, the Finance Committee has sent the budget forward with a recommendation. Under the Public Safety Committee, we have police, fire, and emergency management, and this evening we'll be reviewing all three of those budgets. Giving the presentation today is Mr. Trevor Minor. Mr. Minor, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman Taylor. What I'm going to present is the proposed fiscal year 15-16 public safety budget, very high level. Here, we want to start with our merit pay increase. This is something that you all have seen before. Again, it's tiered 1.5 to 3% based on performance. We budget 2%. And a market pay increase for all permanent employees, 1%. That's full and part-time. Also included in this proposed budget is for the police department, there's a few budget highlights. We have the crime lab contract, $108,000. Maintenance and storage of body cameras, $203,820. Additional vehicle bills, $61,500. Increased training of $50,000, and also K-9 of $20,000. And these expenses are due to, again, the decreased availability of federal forfeiture funds that we, I guess, predict seeing those greatly reduced in fiscal year 16. We also have capital outlay, and these are lease payments only, the amounts that you see. 65 pursuit vehicles, $382,850, as well as 360 ballistic vests. And we continue on with the police department, again, capital outlay, public safety center, main server, $34,000. With those vehicles we're purchasing, and also with the current vehicles, there's a need for in-car laptop replacement, approximately $71,700, 37 office laptops, 21 desktops, 35 in-car printers, 50 radars, 500 tasers, 23 gas SCBA mask, $12,600. Moving on to the fire department.
Mr. Minor, if we could pause for a quick second. Councilmember Light, you have a question.
Yeah. On page 9 of our agenda book, I'd like a comment, perhaps from the chief or whatever.
Which chief,
about-
Councilmember Light?
Police chief.
Police chief.
What did I say?
That was my fault. We're reviewing the police budget. I said which chief, but
Oh, okay.
You just let them come to the
Okay.
table if you want.
Police chief, about the graph on page 9 about our crimes per thousand. And this is the benchmarking thing. Is this, again, just a way people are counting or not counting?
Chief Roundtree, I hate to put you on the spot, but you can feel free to have a seat at the table. And Chief Mayo, the same thing goes for you. You're welcome.
No.
I don't want Chief Roundtree to get ahead of me.
Good evening.
Good evening. Oh, Mr. Sadler, please.
Thank you.
Chief, before you answer that, we've got a lot of traffic, so we can pause for one quick moment as Mr. Sadler makes his way to the front. That way we have all three of the folks here who can help to make some decisions. All right, Chief Roundtree is recognized.
Good evening again.
Good evening.
To answer your question, it's my opinion that I've personally seen some creative reporting from some other agencies. What we try to do is follow the guidelines that's set forth in the FBI crime reporting, where if a crime is reported, whether or not a person chooses to prosecute or not, we count that. That's the way it's outlined. But I have personally seen some agencies do some different reporting. So that's why their numbers appear to be lower.
I'd add something else to it. Some agencies only report the most serious crimes. So, for instance, if Councilmember McIntosh broke into your house, assaulted you, and then kidnapped you, we would report that as 3 different.
3.
And some might just report the one.
Okay, all right.
Not that you do
Thank
that.
you.
And we know Councilmember McIntosh would not do that. That's right. For the record.
Highly unlikely.
Has your question been answered, Councilmember Light?
Thank you. Yes.
Mr. Minor, you have the floor. Oh, excuse me, Mr. McIntosh.
To that point, these kind of numbers get used by people when they make decisions about where they set up shop, where they bring their businesses, where they move. Do we move to the other creative accounting method, or, I mean, it seems like we're being punished for doing the right thing.
Well,
I mean, I know we made I guess probably a bottom 10 list fairly recently about the level of crime, and I think if you live here and you're experiencing it, you know that's not really true, but the way we report it makes us look like we're, Wild West, guns blazing.
my philosophy and my stance would be to follow the guidelines that's set forth by the FBI crime reporting guidelines. I think those other cities, they generally, it catches up with them. Like I've heard just from citizens say, well, that's no way that a city that's close to here, that crime was lower than Winston-Salem, just by what you see on the news. You know, the general public knows if you're telling the truth or if you're fudging your numbers.
Councilmember Light.
But it does make you wonder about the value of this whole benchmarking thing when you have to have a question mark.
I think it even came up with, I was in a meeting last week with the sewer overflows.
Yeah.
Where we found out that one city was not reporting everything accurately.
Yeah.
So the same thing is going on with crime reporting.
Thank you.
And we're reporting our numbers as accurately as we possibly can for public consumption.
Yes.
And anything else for the chief at this moment? Mr. Minor, I've interrupted you twice. Now you've got the floor for real.
No, that's all right. And we do have an opportunity at a point in time when we have discussions on benchmarking about those comparisons. And some of those discussions are normally held at that point in time, and we try to hash some of that out. Moving on to the fire department, budget highlights. We have personnel highlights here, and these are net changes to the budget. We have addition of 3 fire captains for safety. That's predominantly training, reclassification of a firefighter into administrative captain position, net effect of $28,240, and reclassified 3 battalion chiefs into division chiefs, which has an effect of $27,040. Fire department budget proposal also includes supplies and service increases, departmental training, $20,000, agility test validation, $28,000, smoke detector program, and also supplies for new personnel. We continue along with the fire department's highlight, capital outlay, and again, these are annual lease amounts. 1 rescue truck, $60,000, 1 fire pumper, $55,000, and those terms are 10 years for lease. 6 command vans for 4 assistant chief replacements and 2 battalion chief replacements, and also 1 pickup truck for new safety training officers. Those are under 5-year lease terms.
Mr. Minor, if I can ask you to pause for 1 second. Are there any questions for Chief Mayo? And Chief Mayo, this may be a good time to discuss this. I know you've talked about this at committee before, but you're looking at implementing a slightly different system than we've seen in the past in reference to, I believe, the battalion chiefs. Do you want to talk a little bit about that at this time?
Yes, sir. So we currently have 4 battalions, and through an innovation of one of our current battalion chiefs, we're going to keep 4. What I presented to you originally was reducing from 4 battalions to 3, and reclassifying one of those battalion chiefs to division chiefs. we're going to keep the 4 battalions. We'll still have 3 battalion chiefs, but we're going to draw one of those battalions geographically smaller, and we're going to do something that I've not ever seen done, but we're going to give it a try, and I think it'll work. Is use that 4th smaller battalion as a training battalion. So when we have captains who are on the battalion chief promotional list, they will be able to ride in that training battalion under the direction of the division chief, who is the highest ranking chief officer on each platoon, and get more on the job training in a more consistent manner, and be privy to more command staff activities than what we are currently able to provide. So I think I've answered your question. So we'll still have 4 battalions geographically. There'll be 3 battalion chiefs on each platoon, and one of the current 4 battalion chiefs on each platoon we will reclassify as a division chief. That person will still be on shift, but at a position that will reduce the span of control for the operations chief.
I think it's a good idea, and I'm excited to see how it pans out. I'm sure it'll be, whatever it is, I'm sure it'll be good for the overall public safety of the citizens that we serve. Councilman Berlight?
Thank you.
Councilman McIntosh?
You probably short time here enough that this may not apply to the fire department, but I was meaning to ask the Chief Roundtree about our maintaining our personnel. How are we doing on that? Are we doing any better in maintaining our personnel in the police department?
Well, we're trying as best as we can, but we have lost some personnel due to, of course, natural attrition with retirements, just separations, but we have lost some to other agencies also.
And I don't know if you have any idea of that with the fire department.
We are short right now, and I right off the top of my head, I can't remember how many, but we're going between now and the end of July, we're going to have 25 come out of training. We're going to start 18 more in July in another academy. So when these 25 come out, we're going to be in pretty good shape, but we'll need the 18 that will start in July to keep us in that decent shape between now and the end of the year. We lose about 18 through attrition every 12 months.
Obviously retirement and all that, but just they decide they don't want to be firefighters?
Retirements, they accept positions with other emergency services agencies. They go into the private sector. You know, everybody makes decisions based on information they have at the time that they think is best for them and their family.
Okay, thank you.
And the same for us. We have some that leave for personal reasons. We have some that leave for change of careers. We have some that leave for other agencies that may be paying a little bit more. And we have a class, of course, that graduates on June the 26th.
Friday.
Right now it's 39 in that class, and we plan on starting another class in August.
And there are some, Councilman Berlight, we've heard that have left because of the cost of living. Mr. Manager, you want to touch the merit pay increases?
Yeah, we've tried in this budget to have a little additional for merit and market. So this budget has, for merit, it has an average of 2%. Top performers will get 3%, and then there's also a 1% market adjustment for all permanent employees, full-time and part-time. So that helps us a little bit. We're also raising the entry level by 1.5% as we continue to struggle to recruit. We watch that every month and look at what the turnover rate is. The goal that I've given both chiefs, my preference would be that we maintain full staffing or above, so that we know that we're going to lose so many during the year. It would be much better if we could get to the point where by the time we got down to actual staffing, so we never got below what the authorized strength was, which means you got to be above for a while. We struggle with that, but that's the goal, and that's why both departments have classes about to graduate and new classes about to start.
And if we continue to be consistent with this, I believe we will continue to be competitive with other corresponding agencies. Councilmember McIntosh.
City manager and I have talked about this in the past. I know it's a difficult thing to actually make work, but we've got firefighters and police officers who live outside the city because of the cost of housing. We know it's more expensive to live inside the city. It would be great to find a way to compensate and to recruit through housing. I think your response times would be greater. I mean, I just think it works all the way around. But I know that's we've talked about the ability of us to do that. So
we can certainly look at it. I mean, if we can't do mandatory, but we could look at voluntary housing or other incentives to live in the city.
Good. Both of you guys, how would you characterize the age of your fleets? And I know the police are getting a bunch of new cars.
Well, I guess overall we have some vehicles that in our capacity that are we're pushing the limit on them. So the age is we have some that's fairly new, but we have some that's that we're stretching out a little longer.
We have 7 pieces of apparatus in the frontline fleet with over 100,000 miles on them, which is high mileage for a fire truck. You know, what a lot of people don't realize is that a fire truck never gets a break. You know, it's not like a dump truck that half the time a dump truck's empty. A fire truck is loaded within about 2,000 or 3,000 pounds of what that truck is designed to carry all the time. Mr. Garrity has been receptive to getting us caught up as best we can afford, and to considering a refurbishment program. You save about 40% on the cost of a new apparatus with refurbishment if you do a complete refurbishment like you should, and you get something back that is like new, but you salvage pumps and aero devices and other things that are not so much critical wear parts. So I think over time, we're not going to, over say a 30 or 35 year period, we're not going to save more than $300,000 or $400,000. But at the end of that 30 or 35 year period, we will end up with a fleet that is in much better shape than we otherwise would if we continued on the current program.
Right. I'm very much in favor of the refurbishment program. I come from a background in refurbished mainframe hardware, and I understand the value of doing that versus new. So I highly recommend that we do as much of that as possible.
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Sallow, we haven't forgotten about you. Well, we'll get to emergency management in one moment. Councilmember Burke, Mayor Pro Tem Burke.
Yes, I was going to say, we've always said we do not put a dollar sign on the safety for the citizens in this community. And it has been a challenge with this fire and police as far as salaries. And of course, I've discussed with the city managers, all of us, about wanting to make it a person want to stay rather than leave the job. We spend a lot of money, a big investment in individual police and fire people, and we need to do everything we possibly can as long as they love the job and they want to do the job for them to stay on the job. That being said, I have a concern about how we use materials and supplies and how we use these trucks and cars that we are in charge of. Some still leave the motors running too long while they're doing whatever they may be doing, and that's gas that's being used. And so I think that's something that we need to check a little more carefully. And I was talking with the city manager the other day, and I told him in this day and age to get paper from all of these departments and to see the few lines on a sheet of paper, I think that there's a sensitivity not only in your departments, I'm talking about throughout the whole city. And I said to him, they need to have these little tablets like, and for you to send me every month, first, second, and third Monday, for me to look at something, all these ages I've been working around here, and I can't see your minds changing things with technology. I said, y'all supposed to be smart. Why do I have to tell you smart is what you need to be doing? You ought to be telling me. But we are still wasting too much paper. Every department across. Too much gas. And I will never, and I'm going to leave if we don't finish shortly, I would never leave this table with this budget without talking about how your departments ought to mirror the city. I know that you're talking about changing and you're bringing in new programs and you say you're going to do this and that. It does not look good in this community when you go through neighborhoods and you go into a police department or fire department and you see one race of people managing everything. I've said to the city manager and Mr. Chairman and members on this committee, we ought to be doing everything we possibly can with as diverse as this city is becoming, to find ways that when you have those classes, that there are people finishing the classes not of one color, but of a diverse color. And I know a lot of us feel better when we look at our city, we talk about working together. So what will it take? First, I look at the fire department, fire chief, that can be done to change how that fire department looks. I'm going to ask the police chief the same thing, because I know you inherited some things.
Right. Well, so one thing is you have to be serious about minority recruiting. You have to dedicate resources to it. So the way we do that now is we have, in the last 90 days, we have formed recruiting teams, and their task between now and between the time they formed and the time we will start accepting applications next spring will be to form partnerships in the community so that we can recruit from women's college athletic programs, so that our Explorer Post is recruiting more inner city youth who have not been exposed to particularly the volunteer fire service. So building those relationships. Another thing we have done is we have committed to running our hiring process at the same time every year to coincide with graduation from colleges and high schools. You know, and we've also reduced our minimum hiring age from 20 to 18 because some high school graduates, you know, we encourage them to go to college, but some of them are not going to go to college. So by hiring at 18 rather than 20, which was we believe a throwback to the public safety days is why it was set at 20, but a lot of fire departments hire at 18. We think we can capture some of those kids when they come out of high school. We are, you know, with the fire station remodeling that we are doing, we are paying very close attention to having facilities that are welcoming, particularly to females. For example, Station 8 has one toilet in the entire building. Well, you know, there's not much opportunity for a lot of privacy there. So there have been some institutional things, what I call institutional things, that have sort of been discriminatory, if you will. I don't really like to use that word, but I think that's probably as close as I can get. So we have a number of things in the works, and you know, they will have to come up to speed. Probably at some point I'll ask Mr. Garrity if we can get some salary resources for a full-time recruiter, because right now we're doing it with shift personnel, and you know, we just kind of whoever has the time to do it, and it would work better if we had somebody who could dedicate their effort to keeping that going on year-round, much like the PD does.
Chief, you also he's implementing a mentoring program. So with this next class, each recruit
Yes.
will be assigned a mentor from day one to work
Yes,
with
sir.
them.
They'll get a recruit for 6 months of training, and then 6 months after they go on shift. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. All right.
Okay. Well, first of all, we have a mentoring program also for our new recruits to try to keep them in the police department. But we've done some targeted advertising to reach our minorities in the community, whether they're black, white, Hispanic. That's what the targeted advertisement is aimed to do. We've also recently entered into a partnership with the Winston-Salem Ministers Conference. I attend their meetings quite often, and that partnership is designed to get them to help the PD recruit minorities. You know, a lot of times we hear from them saying the police department is not reflective of the community, so I went to them and asked for their help. Also, we did a mailing campaign with the minority churches in the community, asking them to place our recruiting information in their bulletins, on their website, just so we can also increase our minority recruiting. Also, of course, we have our recruiters reaching out to our historically black colleges and universities. We still have the scholarship that's in place statewide at the historically black colleges and universities. Also, we're personally trying to reach out to minorities in the community to help us with our recruiting efforts also.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, the reason I bring this up at this particular time because it deals with the budget. And if it's anything, Mr. City Manager, that you see that the recommendations that they're making that will be included to try to make it successful. Now, I've heard some things from Chief Mayo that hasn't been implemented. And I'm hoping that what you're giving this is a serious, highly serious understanding and consideration that from what you are doing and the presentation that you have made, these proposals that will become real and we can see results. Chief Roundtree, I've heard some of the things that you've said before, some of the things. And so I would say, to me, the challenge would be these folks that you're talking with from these churches and these ministers, that these ministers get serious with you because they know the situation. They have the membership there. And not only would you be going to the minority churches, but you would go to the other churches because we have a large group of Hispanics and Mexicans, and they go to church. And then you have in the churches that have integrated, which was majority white churches, that you will find. And plus, even in communication, white ministers know black people.
Yes, ma'am.
So I think, City Manager, you know what your task is.
Yes, ma'am.
That we will put aside what we would need to put aside to make it work. It can't work if we could say, I don't know if I can get the money, or I don't have this money for this. And I think one thing you said, if the police are doing a full-time recruitment person, you need somebody to do that. You can't work on a job and then somebody stop and change their personality to try to be a recruiter. It has to be a full-time person. And I didn't hear too much about, I heard about the black colleges, HBCUs, but we should look at all those colleges and universities.
And we do. We target all the universities in the state along with the military bases, but we do spend quite a large sum of resources advertising at the historically black colleges and universities in an attempt to get additional minority recruits.
Thank you.
Mr. Minor, stay warmed up. Councilman Blight.
Oh, thank you. I just was actually going to revert back to Councilmember McIntosh's comment about we can't require police or fire personnel or EMS personnel to live in the city. But I know the city manager and I have talked about this before. I would suggest that we seriously look at finding somehow, that's your problem, finding funding to be able to award people housing allowances or whatever to live in the city. And that way, I think our attorney has said you can't require it, but you can reward someone that way. So I would hope that we can look at that in the future.
Mayor Pro Tem Burke.
I meant to say something about that, too, because I feel people who live in the city, they may have more of a sensitivity about what's going on in the city. And at one time, what we did do, the federal government was helping people to do housing, where and some of them did move. I remember I think one police, his family built out on Academy, near that fire station. They built a house or something. So there are some plans and things, if we get real busy, that we can look into where you stay, because the citizen says and this, not only your department, I'm talking about overall, not only the fire and police, because what our citizens in the city tell us is that there's not that much love from the employees who work in the city but live other places. They don't take that pride about how the streets look, how they pick up the sanitation things, and how they do their job, because they just raring to get back to their nice country living. And I've said it to the city manager too. If you care for a place, there's still a lot of nice neighborhoods in this city that you can live and raise your children.
Mr. Manager, at some point in time, I know you have to bring this to finance and to public safety for some type of consideration, but I know we've talked about this same concept that Councilmember Light and Councilmember Burke has brought up, and Councilmember McIntosh, with our transitioning urban residential neighborhood funding and some of the other programs that we have. But, you know, problem's not going to be solved overnight, but, you know, when we talk about setting direction for the manager, and this is a direction that we'd like you to take a look at and give us a report in the near future.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Minor?
Okay. All righty. We'll move on to emergency management. What we have in the proposed budget is continuation of fiscal year 14-15 services. State revenues increase based on the receipts. And hop on here is implementation of the Web Emergency Operations Center, the EOC. In this particular budget, you will see that amount budgeted in IS's budget, approximately $22,000. We'll see an impact in emergency management in fiscal year 17. We'll move on to successful outcomes after release, SOAR.
And I noticed you did pause based on what happened previously.
Yeah.
I figured you would. Our emergency management director, Mr. Mel Sadler, is here. Councilmember Light, I see you have a question for Mr. Sadler in terms of emergency management.
Yeah. Explain to me, if you will, this top line in the on page 17, the flood insurance premium discount. How does that work?
Well, yes, ma'am. The city of Winston-Salem and Forsyth County are participants in the National Flood Insurance Program voluntarily. And there are certain actions that we can take as an office as we drive this program that will reduce the premiums of those people who have to buy flood insurance. If we maintain that level of resources committed to that endeavor, well, I shouldn't say consequence, but as a reward, the premium payers rather, have a reduction in their premium of 10%.
And the aim is to get it even below that.
Yes, ma'am. It's really that requires an investment of more resources, and we're not really sure that you'll get your return that we would anticipate on that. We're maintaining a pretty good level. We're probably able to do that, but it's going to require a bigger, larger investment.
And a second question. I know we've talked about having a better home for the EMS and a better staging area for EMS. Where does all that stand?
We're in the middle of that discussion right now. We're going to be moving we believe, to the Forsyth County Public Safety Center at 301 Church Street. We'll have a non-dedicated emergency operations center, but nonetheless it'll be larger and have more capabilities, and we'll also have be housed administratively there. And that's a major step forward for us after all this conversation about it.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Burke.
Thank you. I was going to say that the emergency management with the limited staff has done a good job. And when we had a few years ago to show us how safe this city would be if we were to have a problem, it was shown through Mr. Settler's efforts how the city and county came together, to how we can work together to make us a safer place. And I ask about that budget too. I say, now, there's a bit of budget, and we're supposed to be looking at somebody who's going to take care of us if trouble, and not even much of a budget to work with. And that gives insecurity, because people say, that little department, if something happens, how are we going to be taken care of? But what they don't see is that he will call in a lot of other folks to do it, but it's still his budget. I haven't looked at it seriously. But it ought to be a little larger than what it is. Now, when we say emergency management, are we talking about emergency management just for the city? How does that department?
No, ma'am. We are a city-county agency, and we work in conjunction with all the incorporated jurisdictions and in unincorporated areas in the county. I think there are 9 jurisdictions currently, and we work with all of them in addition to a number of other agencies, a number of nonprofit agencies. The Red Cross, I mean, they'll serve anywhere in Forsyth County as well as the other counties that they cover. Other Salvation Army, some of the volunteer agencies, in addition to the regular professionals, we also have mutual aid. Whereas, if we run out of resources in one jurisdiction, we'll go to another, and that's all legal and covered by previous planning, covered through previous planning and the mutual and the assistance that sort of compacts that we have in place that will work in those respects.
The reason I asked that, I know the answers, and I asked you all questions, but you didn't quite tell it. A person you heard emergency management, then you say we're going to move on 3rd Street in the Phillips building with the county. Is that the county building?
Well, it's the County Public Safety Center.
Yeah, but I'm saying, so somebody would say, well, if you say emergency management, what the city is going over there? That's one of the departments that we have brought together.
Yes, ma'am.
In county. Wow.
Right.
Thank you.
And Mr. Sadler also, Councilmember Burke, when it comes to personnel, supplies, and services and equipment leasing expenses, I think we're seeing roughly a 3% increase in the budget. Mr. City Manager, did I get that right?
That's right.
And I'd like to, I see Mr. Minor is shaking his head as well. You can't put a price tag on safety. And Mr. Sadler, we always ask you the question, are we ready and are we prepared?
We certainly think so. We've been planning for a long time, so we believe that we are.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Minor, successful outcomes after release.
Okay, SOAR. This slide may have slightly changed due to earlier Finance Committee, but here the proposed budget was $175,000 in total programming funding. $150,000 of it was job reentry programs, $25,000 grants to community agencies, and you see at this point in time when we had to propose, it was $25,000 allocated to community agencies, specifically Eureka Ministries, Salvation Army. I do believe now we have SELF is included, additional $10,000. And it's a $75,000, now it's an $85,000 increase from prior year for job reentry programs.
Way to make the on-the-job change.
Yeah. Public safety capital projects, proposed fiscal year 16, have $200,000 for public safety facility renewal, replacement of HVAC equipment at fire station number 15, and the other capital maintenance as needed 2016, 2017. Those are not specific at this point in time, is on an as needed basis. And we also have facility renewal. It is funded through 2/3 bonds. That concludes our public safety presentation. Any more questions?
All right, members of the committee, you've heard the public safety budget reviewed. We've asked questions of our police chief, our fire chief, and our director of emergency management. Are there any questions for the city manager or our budget director, Mr. Trevor Minor? Now, Mr. Manager, we don't require a motion on this. This is for informational purposes only, correct?
No, we don't require a motion.
All right. No other questions about the budget? Is there anything further that should be discussed for the good of the order? Mayor Pro Tem Burke.
I just thank everybody. Today was a big day in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, because the National Black Festival had its second kickoff. Yeah. And I want to tell you that everybody's wearing purple and black. So if you have anything purple, tie, handkerchief, shirt, pants, because the executive director, Mrs. Hamlin, the wife of Larry Leon Hamlin, who started the idea of one of the nicest, really one of the finest festivals around the country, right here in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. She says it's time for black and purple. And so we want you to do that. And I want to say today, our staff, I had to recognize our staff of what we do during the Black Festival. We can see all of the staff. We see our city manager, our assistant city managers walking. We see staffs from different departments, community development, walking. And we also see our Winston-Salem Police Department visible and available. We see our streets department ready. And I think that's just wonderful. And I said to Mr. McNeil, I was calling all the names today of our Winston-Salem family, and I left out one of the most important ones, marketing. Mm-hmm. And everybody's working and working together. And when any time you have a festival that brings that much money to this city, we ought to be awfully happy. And so I told Mrs. Hamlin I would say something about the festival today. So I have said it. and we're asking everybody to join. And they say tickets are on sale. Didn't they say that? You go to the, how do you get to the tickets, Mr. McNeil? NBTF.org. Can they hear it?
It's NBTF.org if you're interested in tickets.
Yes, and we look, the dates of it will start in August. When is August? 3rd through the 8th or something.
First full week of August.
And again, it's the first full week of August, August the 3rd through the 8th.
And it's so important for us to keep that in mind. And we would encourage everybody to participate, because I believe in something I read, they bring about $10 million here to this city. That helps us to keep our taxes and to do the kinds of things we need to do. So, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to do this.
No problem. I'll take a moment of personal privilege before I adjourn. I'm going to hit this gavel very soon. A critical component to public safety is making sure that our citizens have employment, that they're able to work and feed their families. It shows a sense of pride and dignity to be able to provide for your family. That's the whole premise of the Successful Outcomes After Release program, to hire those who may have felonies and misdemeanors and allow them to be gainfully employed with the city of Winston-Salem. I wanted to take a moment and make a quick announcement about a job fair that will be occurring on June the 12th. And that job fair will be at Herbalife from 9 a.m. until 2 p.m. They're looking to hire about 150 people based on the decision that this council made to provide some extra incentives to Herbalife. The goal is to hire as many Winston-Salem residents as humanly possible. There is a list of what is necessary to get some of the jobs, and there is a list of jobs. If you're interested, we can provide that information for you. But again, they're hiring from A to Z, all types of jobs, from sanitation, to the most skilled type of employment. 9 to 2, June the 12th, about 150 jobs. And we've expressed interest in them hiring local as much as possible. So we want you to feed your family. We want to create jobs for this community, and that's what this committee and this city is dedicated to and is all about. If there's nothing further for the good of the order, we'll consider this meeting to be adjourned.